let's talk about some about your other favorite characters in this film, because they introduced so many new characters. There's so many, yeah.
I'm like,
Let's
we're
just
both
cut
waiting
to
to
the
say
freaking
Donnie Yen.
chase.
I mean, I feel like we're like, we'll get to others, but...
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Aftershow. We are going to be deep diving today into John Wick 4. Masterpiece? Is it the end for John? What's going on? Is there going to be a John Wick 5? We are going to be deep diving into all the details and the burning questions that the film left behind.
The only way John Wick will ever have freedom and peace is in death.
Yeah, not really.
This is a spoiler-filled conversation, so if you have not seen John Wick 4 and you don't want it spoiled, stop what you're doing. Go spend 3 hours in the movie theater and then come right back to me and my wonderful guest, Coy Jandreau. I am so excited. When I heard you were the guest for this episode, I was like, yes!
I can't believe you and I have never done this in person, ever.
I know!
We've talked at so many events and so many times digitally. This is the first time we've done our jobs
I know!
across
from each
to
other.
the point we've been talking about our jobs for 20 minutes.
Yeah, we
We've
have,
been like
before
talking
we
about
started
family
rolling.
and jobs and life.
And how good we are a host.
I mean, obviously.
As a host.
But I love the existential crisis followed by positivity. We're like, let's dive into these things. And oh my God.
Yes.
Which is what John Wick felt like.
So, yeah. So, first of all, before we get to our conversation, I should mention that the Rotten Tomatoes score, this is a very, very fresh movie, is 95%. The audience score is also 95%.
How often does that happen? A critic and audience
Yeah,
score being the same. I
exactly
don't know
the
that I've
same.
seen that.
There's a couple of instances recently. I think it's been off by a couple.
Okay.
But there's also been several instances recently, like Shazam 2, where it's like the audience score is significantly, you almost flip the numbers.
Yeah.
Like
and I
between-
find that it's usually more of a dichotomy. And I think that it's, I wouldn't say like trolling or anything hyper negative, but there is a zealousy to the audience
Yes.
that sometimes they get defensive.
when they see the score is bad by
then they attack.
They want
in,
it
in
yeah,
a very
and they're
strong
like,
way.
Positive,
Yeah, and I find that,
fresh.
or the other
Yeah.
way, when
Or the
sometimes
other
people
way.
are like, we don't like this thing that you did. But it's
Yeah.
interesting to see the exact same perspective from the audience and the critics, and I would love this to be an opportunity for people to go like, oh, Rotten Tomatoes does have a perspective that I share. Because more often than not, it's about people going like, why is Rotten Tomatoes different than me? Or like, critics aren't real people, which is a weird even concept.
That's a whole conversation that
it's
we could,
insane.
yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
that the sharing of it, that's another highlight of this film, is that critics feel the same fondness that the audience does, and critics have a certain language, critics have a certain familiarity and skill set that the day-to-day audience doesn't have, but they both see it the same. That's the strength of this franchise.
Well, let's talk about the strength of this film. And people do consider this to be the best John Wick movie, one of the best action movies of all time. Do you concur?
I put one just a smidge ahead of it. Like,
Really?
just tiny amount.
Can I guess?
Please, I'd love to hear why.
One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. And do you agree?
Okay. Well, I think from story perspective,
Yeah.
one is better.
Yep.
I don't think anything could top one. Origin stories are always hard to top.
And they're hard to, you need a foundation that's so strong
Yeah.
to get to a 4.
Yeah.
It's really rare that a sequel can live up to the first one. And I'm not saying the action doesn't, I'm not saying moments don't, but there's something so eloquent and linear about the balletic movement and the style and the precision in the first one is so specific to me. I love the fact that there's bullets being counted and the gun fu kind of has this really, it's not grounded in reality, but it's grounded in something. And I feel like as you escalate into sequels, you have to change that. And I think that 4 does it better than the other sequels, but it still wasn't able to have the number of bullets be counted, have some of those elements like tie in. So for me, the first one is just a smidge, but I think that this is one of the best sequels of all time. And I would argue that though the first movie is a better movie, I would put this up against like your Fury Roads, your T2s. Like this isn't the best action of all time conversation. It's just tricky because I put John Wick slightly above it as its own thing.
This is my favorite John Wick movie overall.
Yeah.
The first one hits a different chord, like I said. In terms of emotion and story, I think that's a better film. Story-wise, there's all kinds of stuff in here. There's so much more action. It's action-driven, and it's these huge, story in between these huge set pieces, right? Rather than the other way around.
Aliens. Like it's a different type of film.
Yeah. So this actually I thought was the best. And in terms of how I felt watching the movie, there was 2 moments where my heart was absolutely coming through my chest. The card scene, scene, there was so much suspense. And look, I knew it was only an hour and change in. I knew he was going to be okay, but it's still like, how's he going to get out of this? And then, of course, the duel at the end. But I don't remember. I think the last time I felt this way and this engrossed and this, involved in a film where it just took my breath away and made me forget about everything in my life was Top Gun Maverick last year. I think that was the only other time I felt that way recently.
Yeah, we need to look at this as a very unique age of film. Like, people aren't realizing, we're always complaining about bygone eras because that's how we map our brains. But I think we're living in Creed 3, John Wick 4, Top Gun 2. Sequels are really good right now. Yeah. And we're letting these films have a legacy that is in and out of universe relevant. Yes. And John Wick is a great example of trusting the audience and believing in your product and making it the movie it has to be to fulfill the destiny of being a fourth. And there's a reason it keeps going up. Like, there's a reason every one of them opens bigger than the last. Like, the audience grows, it finds its own tone, but it trusts the audience to be absurd. Like, there's so many moments that would literally kill everyone on screen that we go, no, this is John Wick. We've earned this suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that, and there's also some fun tie-ins, like his bounty in this film is $14 million, which is how much the first one's budget was. So what's John Wick worth? $14 million. That's what it cost. I love that.
What I think is so funny is when they were discussing with Nobody, when he was discussing the price at the end, and the marquee was like, I don't know if I want to go to 30 or 33, and I'm like, it's your life.
Yeah.
Do you remember in Jurassic, in the third Jurassic movie, when they were auctioning off the dinosaurs? It was like, you're starting at 20 million.
Those are dinosaurs.
I think the bounty on John's head should have started at 100. I'm so sorry.
It was absurd because my brain, and I like that. Sorry, I said budget. I meant box office. I mean the other way around. Yeah, but I really like that they gave us a cheeky tie-in, but also the whole time I was like, those people have done way worse for way less. Like, what do you mean that many dollars? But same as the dinosaur thing. The numbers felt like a little bit of not in universe realistic.
Yeah. So let's dive into the characters a little bit. It's some of our favorite moments. First, let's start with Keanu. There is something when I was watching it that I was thinking there's very few actors, and I'm going to go back to Top Gun. Tom Cruise, I almost said Tom Hanks, but he's one of them too. Tom Cruise is one of them where I can't, like, there's almost, there's been studies in Japan, I think, about how Tom Cruise actually there's something about his personality that's very hypnotizing. And they've actually done studies into people's brains, and Tom Cruise is affected on people's brains when they watch him in film. I feel like Keanu Reeves as John Wick, or maybe in every film, has the same thing.
He's mesmeric. There's something to him.
He is so mesmeric. And the cadence, people are sort of talking about the cadence and how he's really, like, as every film has evolved, the way he talks and the way he paces out the dialogue, that he's sort of really amped it up. Do you feel that?
Well, I think of the John Wick movies as being a meditation on peace through violence. And I find that each one of his movies, always there's like a dichotomy to it. And I think that's what I'm mesmerized by. And then his delivery is what makes it feel tangible. So like the Berserker comic that I'm obsessed with, that feels like it's a book about immortality that he writes that feels like a meditation on mortality. So like he and Matt Kent, this great comic writer, write this story that feels like it's human beings struggling to cope with their mortality by writing immortality. So for me, Keanu Reeves playing John Wick feels like a man who's so peaceful that he plays a man that is so violent as a way to release and be peaceful. So his pacing, his cadence, his pentameter, his vibe, his energy, all of that feels so at peace because of the violence. And I think that's very intense and very intentional. And I think Keanu Reeves wants roles like that where he can like wield his very specific tool to be the man that can land that no one else could. No one else could play John Wick. Yeah. And I love that for him. Because, like, how many times has he had a franchise? Like, I don't know if there's another more bankable franchise star. Because Tom Cruise is like, maybe the longest running movie star. Yeah. But Speed changed cinema. Bill and Ted changed comedy and cinema. The Matrix is as close to religion as I understand to have. And then this happened in his like 40s, 50s.
And they couldn't sell the movie to begin with.
Couldn't sell the movie. It was going to be like a Walmart $5 bill. That's insane.
I know.
So Lionsgate, thank you.
And then that reminds me too of like the line about the life and the death, about some people live with death. What do you remember what the line was?
It was such a good line.
But it was something about that really reflected John Wick as a character. The thesis statement in the whole thing. All right, so let's talk about some about your other favorite characters in this film, because they introduced so many new characters. There's so many. Yeah.
I'm like, let's just cut to say Donnie Yen. I mean, I feel like we'll get to others.
We'll get to others because there's a few other but Donnie Yen as Kane. I mean, this is the thing. Like Donnie Yen, I guess he's had a few things in Hollywood that haven't really. He was a little bit reluctant to sign on.
Yeah.
he really crafted that character. He really, he and Chad sat down and really fleshed out that character. But yeah, go.
Okay.
Tell me what your thoughts are.
The duality of man is these two characters. It's isolation and wanting and yearning versus having and not being able to have. It's a man who has everything that can't actually have everything because of the deal with the devil he made versus a man who lost everything that doesn't know what he's fighting for. Like, if you look at the psychology, it's really fascinating because I feel like those are two hardcore archetypal figures that aren't usually shown this way. Neither is seen as really good or bad. Donnie Yen is so charming, he doesn't become an antagonist. At no point do you really feel like he's the bad guy, but you want to because you love Keanu Reeves. And there are moments when you identify with both of them needing to kill the other, and you're as an audience member going like, yeah, but he has a daughter. What's Keanu living for? Which is why I think that wasn't a flaw. I think the moment we both had was the strength of the film going like, you should be thinking this until the end.
Yeah, but I think jumping to the end, I mean, this is a spoiler-filled discussion, but jumping to the end, I feel like John knew what he was doing.
100%.
He knew what he was doing, and I don't know if he missed the 2 shots on purpose.
Oh, I think he did. I think from the beginning, his plan was to take out someone big enough to cause an impact, but know that the power vacuum is going to fill it in, but have peace knowing that he's done something that he sought to do. I think all the films, like in the first one, he's back. In the second one, he's got to do this mission. In the third one, he's taking out the higher chairs. In the fourth one, he knows he can't solve the problem, but he wants to take out someone big enough to feel like he did something and go at peace.
And I feel like he wanted to just be free and clear of the high table. And once that moment happened, he dies, which we'll get to. But that was maybe his purpose. His purpose was just to set his soul free in a sense. And his purpose up until this movie, I felt, was he wanted to stay alive to keep his wife's memory alive because he has said, if I'm alive, I can think about her and that keeps her alive in a sense.
Which was his last moment. If
was
he's gone,
his last moment. It was, and here's the thing. Like, I usually have a hard time. I sometimes think death is a scapegoat for writers that can't finish a story.
I've felt like that. I didn't feel like that this time.
And I didn't feel like this time around. I feel like sometimes it's too easy. And when people say, no, but he had to die, even Endgame. I mean, I
didn't like the death scene.
I did not like the Iron Man death scene.
I literally thought in the moment you said it, I was like, that's an example of another time that worked for me.
What I loved about this one, and maybe it's also because there potentially could be a John Wick 5, we don't know, they didn't show a close-up of him dying. And I did appreciate that. Because I don't like the, it's just not.
Whether he died or not, that's not the move.
I think sometimes it's the execution. Okay, so let's go back a little bit, and then we'll dive forward into the end and whether or not he's actually any other standouts for you. I mean, Scott Adkins as Killa
was so much fun. I did not recognize him on the poster.
I didn't either.
And at one point, I went to the premiere and he was standing like adjacent his poster, and I went. And that's when I realized I was about to see the movie, and I'm a huge Scott Adkins fan. It took until physically going, and then it was such a great experience watching the movie, being a fan of Scott Adkins, going like, this is incredible. Because the way he was able to move in that suit and the way he was able to be like a Kingpin-esque force, like the way he fought was so unique. Because Scott Adkins can do anything, so it was cool to see him like lean more kicks because the way his physicality would be is his legs would be stronger and his center of gravity would be different. And I love that they played with the physicality of the stunts to his body type, and they did that really well with Donnie Yen as well. The way they played with the blindness with the doorbell moments, like there are certain elements that really allowed him to see or hear in a strong way. And I really think that everyone that's a boss fight in this felt like a video game where you're like, this boss fight would be this unique skill, this would be this unique skill. And then the running thread of like the guy with the dog is such a great like sidekick antagonist where you're not sure where he's going to land. Yeah. And I loved that element.
Okay, Shamir Anderson.
Genius. I'd never seen him before.
I had never seen him before either. And I guess he did a movie with Halle Berry and Chad was a producer on it. And so he just offered him the role flat out. He didn't even read for it.
Wow.
He is a star.
100%.
Every time he was on screen, I was fascinated by him. I didn't love the choice. I will tell you this. I didn't love the choice. Again, it goes back to close-ups. At the end, when they had the duel and they kept going back to his close-ups, I felt like they just kept going to a close-up and in my brain, because we used to be actors, I was like, I could see them on set. He shot it by himself.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%.
Put a close-up on his face and said, okay, now John's dying. Okay, now John took the shot. Okay, and he had to react.
Right.
And his acting was brilliant. I just felt like it didn't feel like it pieced together with the rest of the story.
My issue was it kept being like, this guy's important. It kept telegraphing.
It indicated.
At no
yes.
point was he not important. I don't need to be told at the end of the movie he's important.
Yes.
He's been important.
Yeah, like I was going to kill him and now I kind of see.
Yeah,
Like, that kid's got something.
That's the trust in the audience thing.
Yeah.
That was the one
yeah.
time I felt like they didn't trust the audience.
Yeah.
Because I hate in movies when there's like a flashback to 20 minutes ago. It's like, we were there. And like this felt like that.
Yes.
Like when it's like, oh, yeah, no, I got it. And this felt like that, but like
the
movie.
montage at the end of the movie when they go back and they show you the whole movie
It's
again.
90 minutes. We were here with you the whole time. I didn't leave. If I peed, it wasn't that long. And like, so when it happened, I was like, we've been with them. We like them. I got you. And so that was the only time the movie felt like telegraphing, but it wasn't enough to make me dislike any of it to a problem. But he definitely felt strong enough to carry his own movie throughout.
Well, I
which
think
feels like kept the spinoff.
I think he should have. Do you agree that he
100%.
should have a spinoff? His story would be so fascinating.
Yeah, I Am Legend without the bad writing. I want that. Don't badly adapt one of the best novels of all time. Come on.
And
But
it's
that'd be
interesting
great.
because Chad said, I guess his original cut was 3 hours and 45 minutes. And somebody asked him recently, what did you cut out? And they said some of his scenes in Berlin, that there was more interaction between him and John. And I wish we had one more scene between the two of them that fleshed out the relationship or where he was coming from. I feel like I just wanted one more
The nuance
scene.
of their relationship would have been nice with a little bit more of like, why are you doing this? What is this? How are we related? Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And then when he spares the dog, when
Yeah.
Keanu spares the dog, as soon as that happened, I'm like, John's dying.
Right.
That was his
'Cause
full
it's
circle
yep,
moment.
It's closure.
But did he have to say the dog's kind of evil? I would have been fine if he took out that dog.
Oh, that dog was great. I love that dog. That dog did the work.
If there's a dog that you can take out, you could take out that
was
dog.
He was just listening to his owner. You like the owner, but not the dog?
No, I love the dog. But I feel like there was too many in the movie. There was too many like kill in the movie. Like I think there was 4 or 5 times where he became a character.
Resident Evil like launch thing. It felt like a video game
Can
where
the
you're like,
dog have a spinoff?
I'm all in. I would watch Air Bud John Wick edition all day. I'm ready for this.
No, but I honestly
Assassin
think that and actually I think as we are, I don't know when this will air, but as we're recording today, one of the producers has just announced there's going to be a new John Wick spinoff that they haven't previously announced.
Almost guarantee it's him.
Do you think it's
if
him?
it's not him, I think it's the daughter of the
Akira.
Yes, Akira.
Rina Sawayama, who's a pop star apparently.
And he just like straight up offered the role apparently. Like,
yeah,
that was
like
a
found her on
fascinating
social
tidbit.
media
Yeah.
and was like, oh, she's got the look or she's got the
She had great
energy or
presence.
something. And she had great presence. I think she has a little work to do as an actress personally, but she did a great
Gravitas
job.
for days.
Yeah.
And I think that
she was up
could
against
carry-
like
And they've already lived in these roles. I can't imagine joining a franchise on the 4th one. Like, they're not only are these Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne, but like they're living in roles they've played for a while. That's so much harder.
So do you think that's the spinoff? Because I don't know about if Donnie Yen, I mean, I feel like at the end it's so ambiguous whether or not, because does he look at her? Does he see her coming? Or I think his expression changes
Slightly.
when they cut to black.
But I want that. I like the ambiguity there.
I love the
and
ambiguity.
It suits the character way more
I
exciting.
think Sopranos was the greatest ending of all time.
Yeah.
I love ambiguity
Yeah.
and people arguing about what it meant.
Breaking Bad too. I love when
Yeah.
a thing ends and you're like, what?
I love that.
I would prefer it not be that story. It just felt like that's why they were setting it up. But
Yeah.
I would rather
Same.
him and the dog. I would rather go that way. I mean, a Continental Show is going to be exciting because I think that's really like well versed in setting up a lot of things. You got to like guest stars. You have people
Yeah.
checking in and out. Like
Yeah.
the cast works. And then Ballerina, I think, is genius because Ann Darmus should be a Bond. Like,
should be a
she
Bond girl. Yeah.
Or she should be James Bond. Like
Yeah.
Anna Darmus is like a spy, like just ready to make a thing.
Yeah.
So like her in this world, genius.
How do you feel about that? I know I'm jumping way forward in our conversation, but this is where it's going. How do you feel about who's directing it? Is it Len Weissman?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you feel about him as a director? Because like some people are like, oh my gosh, only Chad should be doing these. Like it's part of what makes these work is Chad is just he lives and breathes and embodies this material.
Yeah.
And it's such a brilliant. How do you feel about Len as a choice?
I would prefer that. How do I phrase this? I would prefer the spin-offs be directed by other people to keep the strength of the John Wick line clean and let the other films have slightly different tones. Because I think that's the only way shared universes work. I think that if you let a shared universe, if you trust your audience to have the slight differences, you got, references, you've got styles, you've got stunt things that tie in, but you let different directors have their piece. It's like comic books, having a writer and an artist do this, and then the team up works. But I don't want everything to stay with one director if it's spinoffs, because I think then it becomes like, why don't you just call it John Wick 5? So I personally think it's going to be a strength. I like Lynn Wiseman though, so maybe I'm biased. Like I think the Underworld movies are really slept on.
Yeah.
I think that like he's such a passionate director. I didn't love Total Recall, but I loved what he wanted to make. Every time he talked about it, I was like, that's so passionate. And that felt like a studio versus director issue.
Yeah.
But overall, like, you know, he's such a vision-oriented director, and he's got such a precise thing he wants. I think as long as he has the right stunt team, it's going to be the right movie. But I do think it should feel a little different.
I do too. I mean, look, this is Lionsgate's big baby. This
Yeah,
is their
they're not
their franchise baby. They're not going to put it in the wrong hands. They had a choice of they had to pick one person, and that's
Right.
who they chose. And Chad, you know, and he are friends, and he gave his blessing and all that. So
And like David Leitch, look at like the relationship between Chad and David
Yeah.
Leitch, and like he's still around, he's still supporting, like that's still a family, that's still a team. You know, he was around for the first John Wick, and then he went off and made, you know, Deadpool and Bullet Train and these other things that they feel very John Wick, but they're his tone. Whereas
Yeah.
I feel like Chad has had the time to like marinate and only Wick and like just perfect it, like make the sauce even better.
100%.
And it's been cooking for 4 movies, and like I want the Wick world to stay in. If I want to just watch John Wick, I've got that option, but then I've got all these little fun side missions that should feel a little different.
let's talk about the sauce of this movie.
Yes.
Favorite. Let's go through the set pieces. Let's start with Osaka.
Okay.
And that whole action sequence. So unfortunately, when I saw this movie, I kind of had already had the movie spoiled. I kind of already knew what was going to happen. I knew the last hour was Paris. I knew a lot of it. That said, when I saw the Osaka set pieces, and I think a lot of it was because that was the real introduction to Donnie Yen and
Yeah.
Kane and those cool, you know, that cool room. And I just felt like maybe a tad too long, but other than that, I thought, how are they going to top this? Like
Yeah.
I knew they were going. I knew everybody said like the last hour in Paris is the best hour. I was like, how are they going to top?
It felt like a third act. You're right.
It did.
It immediately was like,
in
this
any
is
other
huge.
movie, this would have
100%.
been a third act.
And that's what a 4 can do. Again, it's trusting your audience.
Yeah.
I loved the opening. I really think that this movie could have been longer. I'd love to see that 3-hour, 45-minute
Oh,
cut.
people are going to want to see it. Oh,
that
yeah.
DVD.
And the opening, the Lawrence of Arabia.
Yes. What
Brilliant.
a beautiful, like,
Brilliant.
it just the scope, you open with the scope like that.
I
You're just
know.
like, welcome to John Wick. Like, so
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
And just the black suit, and it's Keanu Reeves, and he's like, the man walks so specifically. He's got
He
this.
does. That walk.
People talk about his cadence verbally. His cadence physically is what I'm fascinated by. He's got certain like hand gestures
Yep.
and certain ways he throws his shoulders in the same way a lot of people throw their hips, and the way he moves his legs is unique to him. You can tell when it's another stunt guy because Keanu moves so specific. So
Yeah.
Keanu does his own stunts.
Oh,
'cause
you can tell?
Oh, I can tell. Yeah. Because Keanu moves like, it's like a fingerprint. Like Keanu
Right.
moves so uniquely, and he did 80% of his own stunts. And I could only tell 2 stunt moments weren't him because of the specificity of how he gets up.
Wow.
There's a moment in the stairs that it literally was just the way he put his arm down and lifted himself up wasn't Keanu, which is creepy to say on Rotten Tomatoes, but like you can tell, like physicality is so important for, we're going to talk about it later, but stunt performance are the visual version of dialogue.
Yeah.
What stunt people do with their bodies is what Shakespeare does with words. When you look at a frame, when you experience a movie, what's happening in that frame is visual and auditory. But the visual of so many of our favorite movies is stunt people telling you a story with their bodies, and there's no reason there shouldn't be an Oscar. And this movie is a great example of what you can do when you have a stunt team that knows not only martial arts but film arts. And Keanu Reeves knows both more than maybe anybody. Like, I get Tom Cruise is the ultimate stunt performer, but his stunts are a different type of stunt.
It's not hand-to-hand combat.
This is, to me, Fury Road for hand-to-hand weaponized
Yeah.
combat. Like
Yeah.
what they did for car chases, this is the bar now for weaponized hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah.
And I think Keanu Reeves being who he is and his physicality is the reason for that. So that opening sequence in Arabia, no one else could even walk like Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
Like if you have it wide and it's a guy like way off, you know it's not him.
But I love how many shots Chad actually does of Keanu's walking and feet.
Yeah.
Throughout the
'Cause it's
movie.
so
There was
interesting.
so many.
Because he's so fascinating.
So fascinating. Agree. So yeah, so Osaka, anything else you want to
I mean, favorites, highlights. I briefly said at the top, Dollhouse, Frogger, and the Rocky Stairs are how I've determined my 3 favorite set pieces. The Dollhouse sequence is maybe my top 5 action scenes of all time. It's up there with the Blood Rave. It's up there with Fury Road's tent pole on fire moment. Like there are certain set pieces that you are watching it in the theater and you're like, this has changed me. Like when you're in it and you're like, I know I'm going to think about this the rest of my life. That dollhouse scene is that for me. I have never felt quite the same level of like, oh, over there. Like in a movie, when you watch people watch movies like Scream or whatever, when they're yelling at the screen, I felt like that. But I was at the premiere, so I'm like, keep it together, man. Like, don't you yell at this giant screen. There's the cast.
I was yelling at the giant screen.
I wanted to so bad. Like, because it was just so much action. It was so intense. And it was so original. It was so inventive. When you look at choreography, he had to rewrite choreography effectively because you don't choreograph aerially for that long. If you think about the language of film, you're so aware of the z-axis, which is, you know, your to and fro, that you're choreographing, you're like a side scroller, and you're dealing with things coming into your z-axis. And that's what makes it so exciting and why you can have certain stunt performers be like, oh, shaking it off and get back up. And you can kind of play with the z-axis so your brain can't handle that much stimuli, so you can allow for certain things. But if you go over the top, now your z-axis is literally up and down, so you just got like this dot of a man, and your brain doesn't go, okay, it's a video game now, but it goes, I've never seen anything like this before, and how do you make little moments this way exciting? Because it's a different format. Like it's a new way to film anything. And so that set piece is not only rewriting choreography, rewriting stunts, rewriting how you film an action scene, but it does it with a flamethrower. It does it with this dragon's breath. So it's what, 50 stunt performers all coming at them. You've got actual fire mixed with CGI.
The choreography on top of it.
And the timing. I mean, a lot of that's a wonder.
Of it. Yeah.
Like a lot of that is I mean, there's obviously has to be some cuts, but like it is a wonder for days. Like that scene is, I think, the best action scene of the year.
100%. I agree with you. Nothing tops that one. That one in the Frogger scene to me. Because that one, as brilliant as it is, you see it from the, when you're seeing it from the bird's eye view, I can understand, my brain can process how they did it.
Sure.
My brain can't process how they did the Frogger scene.
Yeah.
And Chad talked about how they did it, and he said, because I guess you can only shoot there, and they shot during the pandemic, so there was they had a little bit more time around the Arc de Triomphe. But he said they basically took images of it, and then they rebuilt that set, and then they stitched it together, and that was the only way, because they would never have had enough time to film that sequence at the actual Arc de Triomphe. And I think it's just like the speed at which the cars were coming, the number, I don't know how, as brilliant as, stunt performers are, as brilliant as choreographers are, my brain is going to need to see that scene. I've only seen the movie once, several more times before I can even start to it's moving faster than my eye can
And the stitching is so good. You can't tell in the CGI. Like, I love the fact that we're at the point of CGI where those visual effects artists were so good. You don't know when it becomes like not a physical body.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people would have died if they weren't stitching, but they clearly did. But I only know that because of like no one died. Like I only know that it wasn't a stunt performer in certain moments because there was no fatality on set. Otherwise, my brain can't comprehend it. That is such an impressive feat.
Does your brain have a problem at all with the fact that Keanu should have died falling down the stairs? With
getting hit by many cars.
With what I'm calling him. I'm calling him Brendan Fraser from The Whale, but it's actually Scott Adkins.
I was thinking Penguin in Colin Farrell. Colin Farrell's Penguin in the Ice House because it was very Ice House.
He should get an Oscar nomination for being the Brendan Fraser of The Whale of the action world. Killa, like in that scene when he throws him off the thing, and then for me, the dollhouse scene when he falls out of the window and lands on the car, like that was the moment where I was the loudest in the theater, when he hit the car and his body snaps in half, basically.
Yeah.
And, then he falls down the stairs and then he gets back up. Does any of that bother you? That's the only critique that people are sort of having about the film, is that like at some point it gets ridiculous. And some people are saying in their test screenings people were laughing, or in some audience screenings, but it doesn't bother me at all. I think
if this was the second movie, it would bother me. You know what I mean? Like, I think that we want more, and they have to. Yeah. So I remember thinking consciously, like, he'd be dead. And, then as soon as I had said that aloud in my head, I got over it. So I remember consciously having to go, like, I accept this reality. Looney Tunes physics are here.
Yes.
And there are moments that, like, there's a relief in that. There's a comedy in it. Kind of like Jackass. I think the reason Jackass is so entertaining is we as humans are afraid of pain. So we get a rush of adrenaline, and your diaphragm, like the reason laughing and crying are so similar is it's a very similar physical experience. Your diaphragm is seizing and you're having an emotional reaction, and your brain doesn't always know which one's which. And I think sometimes when you're tense, like we've been talking about, and you like you need that diaphragm spasm. That's why some writers throw in a line of comedy in action movies. Some throw in horrific gore. I think this is the pain.
But they don't even give you that moment, because when he does get up, typically they would give in maybe another movie, they might give an actor some time or recovery.
Right.
And they don't do that. He kind of gets up.
All you get is that gasp. You get that one exhale, and then it's right back to it. But I think without those moments, then it would have just stayed tense. Like you need to play the equalizer of the human experience. Like you need to be the orchestra going like, breathe in, we're back. So I think he needed to almost die, or would have died a lot for us to be like, okay, this is insane still.
Why did Kane help him up the stairs? Why do you think he helped him? Really?
Friendship and honor. He like, at first
knowing
I thought,
that he could potentially die. I mean, he's going up against John Wick. He's blind.
I think he knew.
Really?
I think he knew his friend would protect his daughter. I think from the moment he was assigned that, he knew the problem was going to be him making the decision. I think he trusted John so much that he had to kill John, or John was going to do what he did at the end. I don't think there was not a moment of hesitation. I think my first thought was the honor of fighting a worthy opponent, but then like little moments like him slicing his hand and stuff was like just like,
yeah. What was that?
That was balance. Like I prevented you a handicap. There's a little handicap from me. Like you got to take you down a peg. Like I just saved you a lot of stuff. Here's a little bit. Like you're gonna pay it back. Like it's
it was his shooting hand too, wasn't it? Yeah.
So like a blood trade, like a moment of balance. So to me, it was a worthy opponent, legacy, friendship, all that, but mainly trust. Like he trusted that character to do what was right.
There's a real hand theme in this franchise, because with like nobody's hand.
One of the most
that was the one thing I looked away.
100%,
oh my gosh,
100%.
Jinx.
Definitely, yeah. I could not hang. Yeah. No, that was
I couldn't see it. Really?
Yeah.
You're that person? I would think that you'd be the person that would be like,
I don't watch medical shows. I can't
Neither
even watch
do
fake
I.
porn. I can't even watch if I
Really?
can't. I don't watch horror movies. Like I like Scream. I like Black Phone. I like I'm learning this in this real time. But yeah, I can't watch horror and gore. I can't because I think I connect too much. I'm too in. Like we both talked about getting physically anxious in action.
Yeah.
When I watch gore, I'm like, why would I put my brain in a position to think this is real? Like, why would I do this to me? And like, the world's dark. I don't need to put it in my brain. So like, when there's gore and stuff, I'm just like, not for me. And that moment, I fully turned away.
Okay. Did you watch when what's the character's name? Chidi dies on the stairs. Did you watch what the dog did after he killed him? I didn't watch that part.
I definitely watched that part, but I think it's also like revenge is interesting. Like, there's a vengeance to violence that sometimes feels justified versus
100%.
Like that didn't feel. I mean, I get the story purpose, but I didn't want to see it. Whereas someone suffering that feels like they've earned it, that feels different.
Yeah.
Like seeing bad people get hurt feels different than seeing good people get hurt. And we like that guy. So like, I didn't want to watch him get hurt.
So what do we think of Bill Skarsgård as the main villain?
So much fun. What did you think? Because I had an interesting take and then it changed. What did you think of him?
Initially, even though rest in peace, Lance Reddick, even though he killed the concierge, that was sort of your way into hating him, right? Like he's so evil, and then he did it in front of Winston, and like it was like, that was kind of like watch your partner die in front of you, and I'm going to spare you. The thing that didn't work for me story wise was when Winston's character came to him to tell him about the duel.
Yep.
He just accepted it. Why didn't he just pop him?
So that was my issue. I was wondering if you were going to bring it up, because I was trying to think of a way to tie in his petulance with the movies overall, like everyone's an 11, and I feel like it was almost there. I feel like Skarsgård always plays an 11, so maybe I'm just as a fan watching this going like, that's the man, that's what he does, that's his work. And I think that was my only issue with him, was that everyone else felt like they were very in-world, whereas he felt slightly out of the tone. But I still enjoyed him enough. It didn't. It never took me out. But there were moments where I was like, "That feels odd." It just feels a little removed.
See that in a sense, and it worked for me as I thought about it afterwards, because he did feel removed from sort of like the villainry, like the typical villainry. But But sometimes leaders are like that in a sense.
Sure.
You kind of wonder how they got to where they did.
Right. And that was fun. Like, I liked seeing him play.
Because they didn't really show you. Like, he never
No.
got in on the action. He was kind of lead, and it was like everybody would follow. And it was like, why is he the marquee? How did he become the marquee? I would be
Right.
interested in seeing his story and how he became the marquee. Because it almost didn't, he seemed like such a coward.
Yeah.
That
Like,
it
how
was
did this
just like,
happen?
how did he become the guy? But then just, in early, he sort of said earlier on, like, he doesn't play by the rules. So
Yeah.
why was he playing by the rules in that moment? Like, why didn't he just pop Winston and be like, I'm not doing any duel?
This is
like,
done.
This is done. And when they sat down in front of the Eiffel Tower to decide when and they were turning
Yeah.
over the things, why did he say, because his vote was not in the sunrise the next day, and John Wick was like, right now. Why didn't he say a week from Thursday and just have the chance
That's
to
it.
just have like a week and a half to have
just
his
hunt
other
him down.
guys hunt him
That was also a
down?
great sequence, though. That
was
that led to Arc
gorgeous.
of Triumph, but that entire chase that went on, like,
Yeah.
that was like a 40-minute movie of just like them pursuing John Wick because of this guy's order. That was insane.
Yeah, and if
I
you've ever
love
been
that.
to Paris, none of it makes sense because why would the boat drop them off where they did to go through the Arc de Triomphe to get to the Sacre-Cœur? And by the way, you don't need to go up to the steps of Sacre-Cœur. You can get dropped off around the back.
This is me every Boston movie. Every time Boston's in a movie, I'm like, that's not where the Mystic is. What are you doing? Or like in Ambulance, when they leave the convention center and then like 20 minutes later they're back at the convention center. I'm like, where did they go?
Right.
They just take a left? Like, what is this choice?
I mean, this is totally random, but in The Holiday, when Kate Winslet arrives in the U.S. and she goes along the PCH to get to Beverly Hills, I'm like, that doesn't happen. You take the 405 to get to Beverly Hills.
This is why the Californian skit exists, is because we're so proud of knowing the roads. Like, we're just like, that's not how that works at all. In the Fighter, Christian Bale runs across a bridge and he runs by my house on the other side. But in the shot of him running, he's running the wrong way. And so the only time
Oh my God, that's
and like, so
funny.
when I watch it, I'm like, that's my house. That's not where my house is. And it's so funny
No
because whenever I
way.
watch that movie,
Such
I'm
a
like,
good movie,
oh, I
though.
love that movie so much. Yeah, my hometown's Lowell, so it's funny to see those moments and tie yourself to them emotionally. But this one did a great service to Paris and where it traveled
It
because
did.
it felt like you were living in that world.
You 100% did, and that was like the most. Who's that pissed off in Paris? I want to know. And where were the influencers around the Eiffel Tower and everything doing the selfies when all this
Blissfully
was happening?
exist in John Wick's world, which is a gift.
But no, I mean, the whole thing was so extraordinary. It was utterly extraordinary. The steps for me, the falling down the steps was the win.
Yeah.
The actual going up the steps and fighting these guys wasn't as beautiful as, the God's
We had
Eye,
so
the
many,
dollhouse. I mean, we had, but what I found so interesting leading up, getting into this duel was so much of John Wick and so much of this film is about body count and just these random guys he's popping off. And when you actually come to the final moment and it's a man looking at another man who he's known for a long time, who he has a history with, and they become humans again, right?
Yeah.
They're no longer machines. They're humans, and they have to look at each other and actually fire a single bullet. You think about how beautiful that is and such
Yeah.
a gorgeous. Am I making you tear up?
No, I'm just thinking of like the humanity of it. It's just so intense. Like it's real.
Absolutely. Like I said earlier, I don't always feel like deaths are justified or necessary, and sometimes I would like to see different ways to end a story. This was the one ending, and I totally bawled. Him sitting on those stairs and having that moment alone, the fact that Winston left him alone, he's like, take me home. He sits down on the stairs. You see this gorgeous sunrise. Without even showing the wife,
Yeah.
you knew where his brain was going with that sunrise. And I thought back, it was also a full circle because the very first John Wick, the first few scenes, there's a lot of white in his house. It's very white. It's kind of, everything's very blown out. And that's kind of what that full circle moment was for me visually, because everything had been so dark. And then you have the sun come up and it was such a gorgeous moment. Is he dead?
I think so. I know a lot of people don't, and I know they left it ambiguous, but I really think Take Me Home was like his body. Like Take Me Home was he wants to be with his wife. Take Me Home was I've accomplished my mission. I think that like he knows it's never going to end. So that was the closest to it ending that he could do. And I think that he had nothing to live for, but Donnie Yen did. And so it was the gift of like, this is it. And I also think that like It wasn't a wound that Donnie Yen gave him that killed him. It was just like he's kept going through all of this. Like he's just broken. Like
I think he decided.
Yeah,
I think the
he's just
moment
out.
he said, because before that, he would never sort of accept, like he would always say, I'm going to kill you. I'm going
Right.
to kill you. He would never sort of ponder the idea he could die.
Mm-hmm.
When he said, this is what I want on my tombstone, it was like he was mentally preparing himself. He kind of had accepted it. And I think sometimes, if you're into psychology, like you said, you're into psychology, I think, what you set your mind to or what you allow into your brain, like the secret kind of thing.
Yeah.
He had never allowed that to enter his brain. And once he decided and took the jacket off, frankly.
And he said bye to the people he cared about.
Right.
He did like a farewell, and he'd never done that before. Like
Right.
he said bye to everyone that meant something to him, and then he had a beautiful moment to leave. And I think that's really impactful. And I do again like that they didn't show his actual physical death, but I feel like that's it. And I kind of like that clean ending. If there's a John Wick 5, I'm there. But like I really think
Okay.
that it's beautiful.
So my big question to you is, did you see the Hollywood Reporter interview? Chad just did an interview where he said John is dead.
Oh, did he? He confirmed it. Okay, because
So here's what he said.
99.9% sure.
So what he said was they were planning on doing John Wick 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
Then he decided he only wanted to do 1 and then the other. And then as they were developing 4, he realized, and they went to Lionsgate and they said, here's what's going to happen. And Lionsgate went, what the fuck? Literally, what the fuck are you guys doing? They
love that.
shot an alternate ending
Oh, wow.
where John, in the funeral scene, the dog does look up, but you cut to, and I don't know if they confirmed whether he sees John or whether it's implied that he's still alive because the dog's looking at John.
Interesting.
They don't show him. And when Winston says those words, so they shot an alternate ending, they showed it to test audiences, and they revolted. They did not like the ambiguity or like it's not earned.
Yeah.
And so the original ending is the ending you saw in the movie. And once they test screened the alternate ending and realized audiences didn't like it,
Yeah, it
even though it
undermines
was
the
more
impact.
right, then they decided they went back to Lionsgate. They said it's done. We need to end it.
Yeah.
That
And
said,
that's integrity too.
That's integrity. And they said we're done. Like
Yeah.
John's done.
good.
Chad's
like
done.
Breaking Bad ended when it should, and like when you can end on a high note, the biggest grossing John Wick, like let it be a beautiful
Yeah.
franchise. Don't do 9 of these.
But I'm going to throw a curveball
Yeah.
at you. Because then one of the producers was then interviewed. I don't know when the interview happened, but she talked about future projects.
Okay.
And she said, hopefully there's going to be, they said, a sequel to Ballerina.
Mm-hmm.
We already know the Continental. We're going to announce this other untitled John Wick project that we hope is nobody.
Yep.
And potentially a John Wick 5. So I don't know whether she gave that interview before everybody
The
saw the
re-edited,
movie to sort of
yeah.
make everybody think there could be, so nobody knew. Like if they said this is it, then people would knew.
Obviously,
no,
yeah.
he's gonna die. So I don't know. I don't know
Interesting.
chicken or the egg what came first, but they did shoot it in a way that when Winston says, is he in heaven or hell? The question is, and his answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Also, he can pop up in Ballerina and things because that's said
Yeah.
earlier.
Well, Ballerina isn't. Yeah, it's a prequel, right? So yeah.
So like you
yeah.
can still have that moment to tie in to launch all
yeah.
that. Also, like the way they shot this movie felt very much like we're going to do everything. Like the whole movie feels so big and bold. It's like we're going to put it all on the table. So if they did another one, it's just going to feel like we're trying to find new ways. This didn't feel like it was
And
trying.
they
It just
might.
did it.
And they might
and
down
I'll
the
be there.
road. And I'll be there too. And we'll all be there because it did so well. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, look, it didn't feel like not showing the close up and having that last line be like, oh, he could potentially still be alive. It didn't feel where it was like, oh, they're just doing this so they could do another one.
No,
it
the
really
movie-
felt like a creative choice. It didn't feel cheap at all, the way that they
The universe
executed
feels
it.
ambiguous. Like the
Yeah.
universe has a lot of those like heady lines. Like there's a lot of one-liners in the John Wick universe that are like, oh, and it just felt like that.
He's
it
the
felt
Baba Yaga.
appropriate.
You never know.
Yeah, he's the Baba Yaga. Like it's
He's the
literally the
Baba
Baba
freaking
Yaga.
Yaga.
Perhaps he's gonna have an ambiguous ending, and it didn't feel.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like he's the boogeyman. The boogey.
Yes.
You should never see the boogeyman die
100%.
because then he's not the boogeyman.
Right.
You should have him watch the sunset, cut to his grave,
Yes.
boogeyman, and now he
Agreed.
stays ethereal. And John Wick is ethereal. He's a force of nature.
Right.
He's a figurehead. So I think that was 100% the right move.
100% the right move. 100% worked creatively, but also works if there is to be a
Yeah.
John Wick 5.
I mean, it's making enough money. They might try to throw an island at somebody. But
yeah,
like,
and
it's-
maybe a couple of years from now they'll be like, I always think that once people put projects to bed and they come out, they're exhausted, and then
Yeah.
and they're like, well, "This is it, and we're done." And then 5 years later, like, "We're rebooting it." It's
Right.
like you just needed time off.
yeah, you just needed to rest.
Sometimes, like when people say they're getting a divorce, I'm like, maybe you just need to be away from each other for a year and then come back.
This could work out. This is not the word the be all end all. This could be okay.
Yeah.
But I
You're
feel
just tired right now.
maybe just take off the black suit, Keanu. Just rest. I also want Keanu to rest. Like in real life, I just want Keanu Reeves to like maybe do a rom-com. Like just chill out. Like because 12 weeks of training for this and the physicality he showed and all the stuff he does. Like there's a reason we're all fascinated by the man. But I also like it's so good to see someone that joyful, happy. Like the man. Like there's no bad stories about Keanu Reeves because he's Keanu Reeves. I want him to do whatever he wants. Like there's no part of me that feels like he's beholden to John Wick 5 now, which is nice. I want him to do whatever he wants to do.
I know. I'd love to see him in anything. It's not like one of those actors where you go, oh God, if he doesn't do this, I don't want to see him in anything else, where they're so attached to a role and they're not that great in anything else.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
And also even to the point of like, if he wants to take 5 years off, I'm happy for him.
It's like, you're doing great,
selfish.
sweetie, whatever you want. He's like our child.
I love this man.
Who doesn't?
Selfishly, I want him on a movie a month, but I also like there's some actors where I'm just like, man, just live. Like you seem because there's not that many people that have such an interesting philosophy on life and the world, and that translates in his work. And like you don't get that from just working. Like you don't gather these worldviews by just being on set all the time. So I think we're gonna get better franchises by letting Keanu Reeves go be Keanu Reeves.
Well, you from when you were an actor, like if you can't live it, you can't act it.
No, and if you don't have life experience, you can't portray anything.
That said, I want the Lake House too. Him and Sandra Bullock. Remember, she was. Spoiler alert: she was dead in it. Now maybe they can go off and be in a.
Bring that on.
I mean, like a see-through lake house.
Anything he wants. If he wants Dracula 2, I'm there. If Coppola's done with his Megalopolis and he wants to do a Dracula 2, fine.
Coy, this has been a joy.
So much fun.
Coy's a joy. Tell everybody
pleasure.
where they can find you. This was a great conversation.
You can hunt me down at Coy Jandreau, my name, at Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I'm growing my YouTube. I'm doing out of the theater reviews where I basically just like hold a camera and walk out of the theater to my car and just review a thing to show that I like one take and I don't like repeating myself. I also am growing my TikTok and I'm launching a new podcast soon over at The Real Rejects. I'm also at New Rockstars and I'm here as much as I can possibly be. And just type my name everywhere. I don't like free time and I'm on the internet. And I will have just wrapped MegaCon, so hopefully some interviews are up with me and John Bernthal, Charlie Cox, Vincent D'Onofrio. Very excited about this year to come, and this year is maybe the most exciting in movies in a long time.
Yeah.
So I feel like every 2 weeks is something that's like the biggest of the year. So we're eating well, and I feel like both indie, mid-budget, and blockbuster cinema is thriving. So get to the movies, support cinema, and love some art and talk about it. Like art is to be shared and discussed. So as much as you can, connect to things and share that passion for it.
And I do love watching you. I watch all of your out of theater reactions. I love seeing them. I'm like, what did Coy think of that?
They're so much fun.
Yeah,
I just love just being like mental monologue, and like then I feel better. Like I'm like, okay, I got it out of my system.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining this episode of the After Show. We had so much fun. It's so nice when we can talk about something that is just so darn good. And my theater was full, and I hope people keep going to see this again and again and again. We hope you will join us next time on the After Show. I'm Nikki Novak. See you next time. Bye.